Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm here with the rather wonderful Mike Plotnikoff. How are you?
Hello, Warren. Nice to have you here in my studio.
Thanks for having us by. I want to get a little background. Then I'd like to sort of talk about recording. And I see you've got some guitar amps mic'd up there. I'd love to know some, how you do that, what your preferred amps are.
Yeah, sure. We could go through that. So you lead me through, and I'll answer your questions the best I can.
Marvelous. You've got a lot of great history that I want to get into.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
You did an Aerosmith record, didn't you?
I did Get a Grip. Actually, my first record, I could say that I engineered some smaller projects that were unsigned in my early days, like where I had to go find a band at a club in Vancouver where I grew up at Little Mountain. They always encouraged you to go find somebody when there was downtime. You'd bring these bands in,
great,
record them, produce them. They had no money, but you go in on a Friday, you come out Monday morning, right? And you'd have a 3 or 4 song demo. And then, I was the assistant engineer on Aerosmith Get a Grip, and just happened at the last bit of the record, I ended up engineering, and it was mixed by Brendan O'Brien. But that was kind of the first big record I worked on as an engineer.
How was the experience?
It was great. It's like, at first, I never wanted to be an assistant. I always wanted to be an engineer, but I remember that first day when I was actually sat in the engineering seat, and I was recording guitars with Joe. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to get a sound, and I just remember my heart was pounding. Like I didn't even know if I was breathing. Like, and I was an assistant already for 4 years, for quite a while. But now there was no engineer. It was just Bruce Fairbairn in the band and me trying to get a guitar tone. I remember running something through 1176, and for some reason it went all into distortion. It was like, and the meters were all pinned, and I'm going like, I couldn't figure out what's going, and I tried not to panic. And I remember Joe going, that's amazing. Like, what are you doing? That's the perfect sound. I'm going, okay. Yeah. So, and I got away with it. So then I kind of started learning, maybe just go with it, whatever happens. And so that was a fun project. And it ended up, I was supposed to just engineer a couple days of record. We had to spend a lot more time on it, so.
You ended up doing quite a lot on the album.
I did quite a lot on the back end of the overdubs of the record.
Great.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun.
Working with Bruce must have been insane.
It was. He was
on fire in those days.
It was on fire, and the first record I worked with Bruce was an AC/DC live record, so it was live at Donington, and I was the assistant engineer. I just remember they sent, I don't know how many reels of 2-inch tape, 200 reels of 2-inch tape, and we spent probably a month going through it, editing it all together. Then the band came up, and we replaced, as far as the live record goes, a lot was redone in the studio. All Angus solos were kept from the original, but a lot of the vocals were redone, some of the bass, some of the rhythm guitars were out of tune. We spent quite a while, probably 3 months on the live record in the studio. And then, assisted with Bruce for a couple other records, and then after the Aerosmith record, then he thought, okay, well, Mike, you could be my engineer. So then after that, I engineered the Cranberries with him, Van Halen Balance, and I did In Excess, Elegantly Wasted, Kiss Psycho Circus, Scorpions.
And that was all in Canada?
That was all in Canada. We would travel. Cranberries, actually, we did in Ireland. Yeah, Windmill Lanes. So we recorded, and then I mixed the record in Vancouver, so at Bruce's studio, which was the Armory at the time, because Little Mountain had closed down. I don't know if you've been to the Armory, but beautiful studio. But Jim Valens built it for a writing room, but that's a big writing room. Bruce ended up buying the studio, so we made quite a bit of records in there till 1999, till he passed. And we were doing a Yes record. You guys were talking about Yes. So I just started I mixed the Yes record as well, tracked it and mixed it. And it was in the middle of mixes, and Bruce didn't show up, and found out he passed. And so that was my career with Bruce.
Where were you born?
I was born in a small place called Grand Forks, British Columbia. If you were in Spokane, Washington, and you drove 120 miles straight north, and you hit the border, you would end up in Grand Forks, British Columbia.
So you're right on the border?
Right on the border.
Yep.
So, and it was about 5 hours to Vancouver, 300 miles to Vancouver. And when I graduated high school, I'd been with my wife since I was 15. And
oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so my wife and I go, I'm going to be a recording engineer. That's what I want to do. My brother was in a band. My dad was always like a singer in a choir, men's choir, and lead singer in the men's choir. Everybody was musical in my family. I was the least musical. And I always wanted to be a great guitar player, and and a bass player when I was young. And my brother was always better than me, and my cousins, you know, our family was really close. And everybody in my family, especially my dad's side, it was super musical. They played multiple instruments, everything, you know. So, and I was the worst, but I wanted to play, but I could just never play as good as them. So I went more into sports when I was young, but I always wanted to play with sound. So I was always messing around with the PA and the flangers and all the chorus pedals and the amps and stuff. And everybody always thought, oh, you got great guitar sounds. And then I remember one time I was in high school, and this other kid in my high school who was a really good guitar, he's like a virtuoso guitar player, never did anything with it, but you know, at one of those days, everybody, Randy Rhoads was big at that day, and Eddie Van Halen, and you know, they could listen to the song once and play any song, you know. I remember him going to me, you know, you get really good guitar sounds, and you get like all these things you do with the amps is really cool. You should be a recording engineer. I'm going, recording engineer, what's that? And it just like a light bulb went off in my head and go, yes, it was like, that's what I want to be. I didn't even know what it was, and it was it. So I knew that I had to go to Vancouver, and so I finished high school, and I still thought I was going to be a professional motocross racer, actually. But then injuries killed that, so I thought, well, let me try this recording engineer thing. So I moved to Vancouver with my wife and thought, okay, Little Mountains, where that's Bob Rock and Bruce Fairbairn are working there, and they're doing, you know, Bon Jovi and Aerosmith and AC/DC. I got to work in that studio. So I remember...
Good thinking.
Yeah, so I remember going to the studio. I went every single Friday for 6 months and bugged them for a job, till finally they said, okay, you could come in at 4 o'clock when all the staff leave, and you could clean the ashtrays and answer the phones till midnight. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. So,
was it paid or was it an internship?
No, it was an internship. Nothing. There's no money. There's just, you answer the phones. You're just lucky to be here. And it was the thing where I think for every 8 hours you worked in the studio, they gave you a free studio hour, which that's why they encourage you. Then you had to go find the band. So you'd save all these hours, go find the band.
It's good thinking.
Started there, but you know, obviously I just didn't want to answer phones. So I remember I go, well, I got to learn how all this stuff works. And I remember they had 2 rooms there, 2 SSL rooms. So I'd always bring a boombox to the studio with me. So when everybody left the studio at, you know, midnight or 2 in the morning, I was supposed to leave it at 12, but I would stay after, you know, because they gave me the code anyways to lock up. They were really lenient there. And I would just go set up the boombox, try all the mics in every direction in the room, try every mic, what they sound like, run it through the console and every piece of gear, and until I figured out how everything worked. And then also, I was always a big fan of Bob Rock's records. So I was a big fan of Dr. Feelgood at the time, and Bob Rock was like God up there. I want to be like him. I'm going like, wow, he just gets such good sounds, and his records are amazing, and just his whole persona. So I remember back then on the SSL, when he would do a mix or tracking, everything was on a Bernoulli. Do you remember the Bernoullis back then? So I remember buying my first Bernoulli. I saved up enough money so I could buy a Bernoulli, and I would go in, and after he would be in there for a session, I would copy, you know, all his EQ settings, and I had my patch chart and the gear. So I'd write down all the gear, like I would take a perfect, you know, like a recall of whether he was recording or mixing, and then I would come in there and try to go, okay, this is where he put the tom mic, and this is where he put the, you know, I put the Bernoulli, and I bring a band in there, you know, they set up their drums, and I'd match the EQ exactly. Okay, he had this patch going through this piece of gear and that piece of gear, and this is, and I listen, I go, doesn't sound like that. This sounds horrible. This is like terrible. But I would just keep trying, and that's kind of, you know, how I built my chops. It's funny because when people ask me, oh, how do you do that? Or they always want to know about compression. That's the most thing I ever get asked about. Then nobody asks about EQ or mic position. It's like, what are you doing with compression? I go, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I just go, does it sound good in the mix? And honestly, I don't use a lot of compression. It's like, I try to keep it very natural. And I remember even working with Bruce Fairbairn, he would hate when I put compression on. I put some compression. Do you got compression on that? I go, yeah, why? Take it off. Yeah, it sounds way better. Why do you got that on? Yeah, okay, take it off. I'd be like, oh, like, you know, my ego would come down. Yeah, well, I thought it sounded cool, but I guess it doesn't. But yeah, everybody always asks me about attack and release. I go, I don't know. I just, you know, if I feel like it needs compression, I'll use a little bit, but you know.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of mystery. What I sometimes say to people if they want to mess around with attack and release times is like take a drum loop and just see how, you know, you can get it so it's just the transients coming through like pap, 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 pap. Or you can do the opposite, bring up all that room energy and suddenly it's all swamped in like but Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo. Sometimes I've seen interviews with people where mixers talk about timing the attack and release to the song, and I'm just like, that. How does that work? As soon as somebody plays a 16th note out,
it changes.
Changes.
It's done, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of sort of confusion of that.
Yeah, it
subject.
is, and it's an ear thing. You know, you could hear when it's obviously compressing too much or not enough, or you need a little more release, or so it's all by ear. Like, yeah, it's always like, yeah, that's pretty good. To me, everything if that's pretty good, it always works. Like I'm never going like I got to go for this like amazing thing, or this has to be like, yeah, it's pretty good. That works. It doesn't bother me, so it's okay. And if it doesn't bother me, 99% of the time, it doesn't bother anybody else. So that's what I've learned. So I go, okay, if it doesn't bother me, it's pretty good, I'm okay. So my whole thing is almost pretty good. If it's pretty good, pretty good. Okay, that's good. It's going to work.
Before we move into the gear a little bit, now, Bruce Fairbairn, he had a run there of albums which were just phenomenal. Slippery When Wet, of course. Pump, Permanent Vacation were just like, before you came on board, I mean, they're like, those are all the biggest selling albums.
Yeah, Bruce was he's super musical. He is a very good, and he was just one of those guys that he saw the big picture. Again, you know, like Howard, for Bruce, it was really about the songs. He really worked with the band. Here's what the song is, here's what the structure is. And he wasn't afraid to take chances and go, well, this arrangement's a little strange. It's not your basic cookie cutter arrangement. That's okay. Oh, somebody played a little mistake, but that mistake is cool. He wasn't afraid of that. He knew what worked and what didn't work. And he was a horn player, so he had a really good sense of music and arrangement.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Those records still all stand up. And it was interesting working with Jack Douglas with Aerosmith, and he's a smart guy. He's like, yep, you know, we all know it's Toys and Rocks, Pump, Permanent Vacation, Get a Grip. I mean, he knows that those records were fantastic as well. There's no sort of ego because he didn't produce them. You know? Those are all the moments of Aerosmith which are the finest. So.
And Bruce taught me so much too, you know. Again, like you had the discussion with Howard earlier, and he was, same thing, very business orientated, but also he had the musical sense as well, and he put that together, and he ran a tight shift too. Like we always started at the same time, you know. It was like, we always started at noon. We always took a break at, 5:30 for dinner, and we start back up at 7 and work till 9 and take Sundays off. Everything was like, in order, that he stayed on that script all the time. It would never vary. So I learned that, because then I started working with other people, and it was like all over the place. It was a different start time. Sometimes you start at 3, sometimes, and you get mixed up. You don't know where you are. And then I started working with Howard, and he was the same thing. We started at this time, we ended at this time, and everything was like, it's always in the calendar. We knew what we were doing on those days. So we made records like that. And that's the only way I knew to make records. And then that's why it worked when I started working with Howard. I made the same record. He was that same person. He had that, he treated it like a real job. Like we were not like, oh, we're just having fun in the studio. And maybe we're going to go to 3 a.m. now, or, because we always found that after 12 o'clock, we ended up coming back and redoing everything. As much as we thought we got some great stuff, which we did, but most of the time you came back and you had to redo it, but then you're burning yourself out as you get later into the record. And then if we have another record after it, it's not fair to the other artist who's coming in after you worked on this crazy record with this other band. So if we treat everybody the same way, everybody gets our 100% focus.
Absolutely.
And that's what we try to give everybody that we work with. If we're coming in here, I'm going to come in here excited to start at 11 o'clock, and you're going to have me 100% focused for that entire time. And I'm not going to be going, I was here till 4 a.m. and I'm so tired, I don't feel like doing anything. And you kind of go through the motions, and then you're not getting, it's not fair to the artist.
Yep, I agree. That makes absolute perfect sense. So you and Howard did this plugin with STL?
Yes.
I suppose the obvious question is, how often are you using it combined with live amps? Because everybody's going to ask that.
You know what? I'm using it all the time now, because I put it in, and there's a tightness that you don't get from a tube amp, because you get that movement. So this is always, so now all my tracks, I have the amp I record, and then I record the plug-in, and I record just a plain DI. But they're recorded on separate tracks. So if you want to use just a plug-in, you can. And if you want to use just a live amp, if you want to use them together, it depends in the mix how you want them blended.
Well, I know everybody's going to want to know. It's the question. If I was listening to this, would be like, when you come to mix, what do you generally do?
It's song by song, but they're in there. And I would say, like, when I try to record, I try to, if you put all my faders at a straight line, it's going to sound like the record. So you're within a couple dB. It's not like, oh, I got, just a hair of this in. It's, you put them even and it's pretty good, but all my levels are set and, this is where I want it. So if I put my amp level here and I put my plug-in level here, that's kind of how I want that balance to be. Now, obviously, if we come to the mix and there's something in there that, the tube amps are a little too much error, taking up too much woof in the low mids or something, then we'll pull that back, maybe use a little plug-in or EQ that out. Or vice versa, if I want maybe a little more woof or error, maybe I'll pull the plug-in down a little bit.
What was the process in creating this?
Well, STL came to us, Sonny, who owns the company. He really liked the sound of a couple of our records we did, which were, I think it was like Seosin and a band called Starting Line, All American Rejects. He was big fans of those records. He's from Australia and a producer as well. And he contacted Howard through Howard's management and said, I would love to do a Kemper pack on these tones. And so Howard talked to me and goes, well, why don't we do this Kemper pack? And I said, sure, this would be great. We've documented all of our sounds since 2000. We have, I'll show you even, every guitar sound we've ever done with every band is labeled. We have binders for every sound. So we could pull up Papa Roach from 2004 or POD from 2001. And here's the guitar tone we use. This is the guitar. This is the amp. Went through this Neve, preamp through, this pedal. So we just came in and spent a week modeling all the tones and put it in. And it was amazing because we have all the drives too. So we could put up, here's POD's record. We matched the tone and it was close. We were like, seriously, we were so surprised that we were able to match it that quick and then just modeled it into the Kemper tone. So the Kemper pack started doing well. And then Howard and I had the discussion, well, we should do a plug-in. Why don't we take those sounds and make the plug-in? And then that's how the plug-in originated. People seem to really like it. We've been getting great reviews on it. And
I played with it. It's great.
Yeah, it's really good.
Is this pretty typical of your miking?
These guys are typical of the miking right now. So these stay up. Bogner cab.
Yeah.
I'm really a 57 guy for guitars, and that's what I've always recorded. Sometimes I'll put the KSM 32 in there if I want a little low end, but 99% of all my guitar tones that I've ever always done is a 57. And I just came through that because when I did we talked about AC/DC with Angus, when I worked with Bruce on there, when we redid some of Malcolm's guitars back then, it was just a 57. When I worked with Eddie Van Halen, when I did the Balance record, only a 57. That's all he wanted on there. So I just thought, it always worked. So I just stayed with the 57. And again, everybody always liked nobody ever complained about my guitar sounds. And it was just a thing. I've tried other things, 87s and 414.
Any double miking?
Yeah, double miking.
Capture capsule.
I've tried that and it's okay, but I always just find there's always a little bit of phasing or something. I just find the 57 is just a pure tone.
When you're dealing with bands like you were talking about earlier, like In Flames, bands like that, which are going to like low A and low B, do you feel even the 57 still gets that?
Yeah. Just it's always tight. For me, it gets all what I need. It's the purest tone. I find that it captures what I need without having to EQ or anything. It's always worked for me, and I'm sure everybody has their own way of doing it. But for me, in my ears, and the way I build the song up and track the drums, guitars, bass, 57 guitars always sit there.
Nice. But that's interesting to see that Shure there, the
KSM, and I like it because it does add a little bit of bottom end. So if I do, say like you just said, like an In Flames, if they want a little more, I'll add just a little bit, but I'm very picky on how much I add in with the KSM. And I just like the KSM. It's another Shure microphone. And to me, it just sounds good. 414s are nice too, but I just find they get a little hashy on the top end, which I don't like. And that, for me, the KSM rolls it off. It gives me the low end punch that I want.
Are you going to bounce those to one
track?
One track.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. One.
Do you
track.
find you're sort of like, here's your 57, and you're just landing?
Exactly. I find the 57. I get my level. I'll EQ or play with the amp EQ, and once I'm happy with that, and I go, okay, that sounds good, but I need a little more low end. Then I'll just bring in the KSM, and I'll go, okay, that feels good right there. And I just want it to be just a flavor, not too much of it. So I'm very very cautious how much I put in.
So you're finding your EQs all amp side. You're
All
not,
amp.
You're not doing anything on the console.
I never EQ the console ever for guitars.
Great.
Ever, never EQ'd or never compressed once. And I'll move the mics around too. So for the mics, it's like an old trick I learned a long time ago, Little Mountain, I forget who I was working with, and they're basically putting the headphones on, putting the hiss. I always use the 5150 hiss because I find it's the best hiss. And I sit here in the headphones and I move the mic around till I go, oh yeah, I like where that sounds, and that's what I do. And I still use that today.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And over here, I see you've got a 421.
I do. So if I'm doing, the only time I use a 421 is for leads. I'll build my rhythm tracks. Mm-hmm. And when we're doing solos, I find I'll lead with the 421. That's the only time, because if I just find it has that nice 4K punch that I don't have to use, and it cuts through the 57 wall of guitar sound.
Great.
Yeah. And then it's the opposite on there. So there will be mostly 421, and I go, yeah, that cuts good, but I like the sound, the warmth of the 57, so I'll add a little 57 until I go, yeah, it's pretty good with the warmth, because sometimes the 4K for me is like too much of the 421.
And then I see these two cabs here are back to the 57 and the KSM.
Yeah, so and they all have different speakers in each amp. So that Marshall there is a early 70s, and it has the original Celestion 25 blackback speakers in it. Yeah. And then the Wizards have all different combinations of speakers in there. And Rick, he's great. So he came in and he basically set up all these the cabinets for me with different speaker combinations that I would like, and from listening to what I did. So there's some that have vintage 30s in them, some that I forget the what each one has in there. I should know this now. I'd have to take the backs off to tell you exactly, but they're all different combinations in each cabinet.
And you have favorites that you...
Yes, I do. So they're different. So I know what they all sound like.
Great.
It's hard to explain, so I'll go, okay, for this one I want the slants. For the leads, I like the 25s. I just do. I just like the way the 25, they break up, and with the 421, for me, lead guitars, it always works. That's always my go-to, whether I use it or not, but I say 99% of the time.
Fantastic.
And then I know, depending on the tuning of what Wizard's going to sound the best, whether I use the slant, whether I use the straight cabs, or whether I use the Bogner. And that Bogner cab sounds really good as well, too. So it's super tight and modern sounding, so it sounds like really good with the inflamed stuff. And it really has a nice break. The speakers break up really nice, and they're the original Bogner. There are 30s in there, but I'm not sure what make of 30s. Right. Are in there, but I know it's the original Bogner cab.
And you find the 30s are better for like the full rhythm sound?
For the full rhythm sound. Yeah. They're just tight. They don't break up, and I don't get that, woofiness out of there. Right. And again, with everybody using plugins now, and everybody want that super tight, sound, those speakers sound really good. They're tight for it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So is this stuff here, you've been doing some like slightly different stuff, like the super reverb?
Well, again, so if you know the records that Howard and I do, they're always built kind of the same structure. Like, we really build the same house. Combo amps we use a lot for like octaves, all the clean sounds.
Okay.
Everything to put on top is the overdubs, because after I get my main rhythms, I don't want to use 4x12s and amps anymore. I want to go alto combo. So I'll go to the Watkins, or you see the Vox up there. I got the Gibson. I got another Watkins up there. And so these amps always sound good, again, because I don't want to EQ or compress. So when I put one of these cabs, it's a complete different frequency, different sound, different animal. So it's almost like, oh, is that a keyboard? Then you put a pedal on. I don't have to do anything. I could just put it a little bit, and they come out super clear and clean.
When you're layering the rhythm parts, do you use multiple amps on performances, or do you just stay with like one?
I stay with one. Every now and then I'll use multiple, but for me, I find that I tried, and I know a lot of people use it. I know, like I was telling you about Bob Rock, he uses multiple all the time. But every time I do it, I always have a phasing problem.
Sure.
There's always phasing issues. No matter what, I always go, yeah, it's an interesting sound, but I'm losing this frequency in here. Or no matter what I do, you can't flip the phase. It's in between. Even if I move mics, it's somewhere, it's a little in between. I go, well, I don't like the way it's taking that. So me, it's simple. I try to keep it simple.
And on a production question, is it one main performance on the left, one main performance on the right, or are you finding you're doubling up?
Yeah, so it's one main performance. So I do the same. I record all the same. So I do the choruses first. So I always build the chorus. So I start the chorus and I double the chorus.
Yep.
And sometimes we fly them in today's world. It depends what the band want. If the band want the song to be a little, moved top to bottom, then we'll do each chorus separate. But if they want it to be like, and that we talk about that. So every band is different, what they want. Do they want each chorus to be exactly the same? So then we'll fly, so I'll double it up, then I'll triple quad them. So then I'll take another guitar, another amp, different speakers, and then I triple quad. So the choruses have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers.
Each side?
Each side. So 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, left, right, left, right. It's all my choruses, all the time. Do it the same way all the time.
That's amazing.
Yes. And then I add what I call power guitars underneath it. So pretty much just the roots underneath, just holding, and then I'll use another guitar, another speaker.
With those power guitars, like a baritone?
Baritone, something different again. We'll find what works for it. But baritone is used a lot different. And again, everything is always a different amp, except for the main. So it'd be single, double, which are the exact same guitar, same amp, same cabinet. Then I'll do the triple guitar of that, and that'll be a different guitar, different amp, different cabinet. And then do that, and then if I do the power...
And each of those are doubled?
And then those are doubled, and then I'll do a power guitar, single and a double, and that'll be a different. And those are usually through an amp, through a 4x12. Then there's overdubs or octaves or arpeggios or whatever, or a melody guitar, whatever the hook is over top. Then I will go, everything then is a combo amp, or like the Silvertone or something weird.
Right.
So it's never traditional.
Great.
That's where I go, okay, now I'm in experiment. That's going through some weird pedal, and that's where the difference comes. But everything else the rhythms are really stock. They're actually pretty simple, more than you would think. You would go like, oh, what's he doing? But it's really what's over top of it in the hook that's making it.
Right, but you're also got acquired knowledge because you're going up and you're setting the amp up.
Yeah.
So it's not woofing all over the place with the low end.
Yeah.
So that...
So the guitars are tight, and I really for my guitars, it's very important. There's no woof. I do not like woof, and I don't like that, 200. So it's always like it's really tight in the mid range, 800 to, 1K. I don't like to try to get above 3K on the guitars. Maybe a little bit on 5K when it's mixing, but try to stay there because then it starts getting in the way of the vocals and the high end of snare and cymbals. Then it starts getting to be a mess in that area. So I try to keep the guitars all in that. Maybe start 600 starts creeping in, and that 800, that's kind of where I like my guitars with that, like what I call a throaty crunch. I just want to feel it in here. And I don't really want to feel a lot of low end from the guitars because there's enough in the bass and there's enough in the kick drum and all that to fill it in.
Do you ever use any room?
I do, but
just for the lead stuff?
Just for the lead stuff, for the combo stuff. I don't use it for the big amps, but I do use some room every now and then, and we'll try different things too. Hey, let's throw it in the corner there and mic the wall, like a weird reflection or something.
Amazing.
So we'll play around with that too. It depends. Again, I try to treat each song like it's its own entity. So I work on one song and finish it.
Great.
And then do the next song, and everyone becomes its own little animal, with some, what I call like a thread that keeps it coherent top to bottom, but everyone is a little bit different all the way through. So it's not like I just dial that in, and that's the same for the record. Let's just go, like some people will go, okay, here's our rhythm sound, let's do all the rhythms, and then I don't do that. It's like, let's get that whole song done, all the rhythms, all the leads, and then I do the bass. And then when that's done, then it goes to Howard, and then Howard does all the vocals.
Fantastic.
So that's our kind of chain of command. And then we have an editor who's Paul DeCarli, who's amazing, and he's been working with us for, 15 years now, and he's been, worked with Bob Rock, worked on Metallica and stuff, great editor, so he does all our editing. So as soon as I finish the tracks, upload it onto our server, has it all edited by the next day, goes to Howard, Howard does all the vocals, Howard uploads all the vocals to him, he edits it, and then Hatch, our assistant, puts it all together.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's like it takes the team to work and do all of its things.
And then you're mixing.
Yes, and then we'll mix it after.
Fantastic. And you mix in a hybrid fashion on the console?
No, so if I do my own projects, I do, because I'm in here every day. If I'm mixing a project for Howard, our projects,
Yep.
it's 100% in the box, because Howard has his own studio at home. We have the exact same plugins, everything. So whatever opens up in my computer opens up in his computer. So if I do a mix and Howard doesn't want to come down and listen to it here, I just send him the session file. He opens it at home, and if he wants to make a little change, he does, and then he'll call me. He goes, "Hey, Mike, I made a change here. Check it out. Do you like it or not? Or can you do this?" So he doesn't want to come down here where it's going through the console. But if I'm doing another band or somebody sends me stuff, I'll do some through the console. Everything's just at 0, but all the automation's in Pro Tools.
Great.
Here's some of my guitars here. Start here. So
That's gorgeous.
that's
looking.
a 79 Les Paul custom. This guitar is a 58 all original Les Paul Jr. and this is used.
Gorgeous.
This is the main rhythms on 90% of all our records.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds amazing. Even in a low tuning, it just has this throaty sound, and no guitar sounds like it.
I'm seeing the Trini Lopez coming up.
Yeah, Trini Lopez. This is a 67 Trini Lopez, and
Gorgeous.
use it a lot as well, which sounds amazing. This is really good for overdubs, octaves, arpeggios, if you want some strumming chords. Then a 74 Strat, pretty stock.
Great. What do you find using the 3-bolt Strat for?
The Strat's just if you want that Strat tone. Again, it's all little for overdubs or taste or color inside the track of our heaviness, where there's like something going on. What's that sound in the back? Is that a keyboard? Is that a guitar?
But this is getting a lot of love for the heavy parts?
Yeah, this one and this one also is getting a lot of love, which is a longer scale baritone. It's a Schecter. I have another Les Paul, which friend of mine is using right now, which sounds really good. I used it a lot on the In Flames record, which sounds good.
And now they're coming in with 7 strings?
No, it's all 6 strings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are you finding you're working with bands with a lot of 7 strings? Or?
The bands I've worked with 7 strings are the band Issues I worked with. They were 7-string. Fear Factory 7-string. Maybe Escape the Fate with 7 strings as well. And they're going really low, and they're dropping to A, and then it's just like, okay, or B, where they're way down there in the basement. So then, we'll use a 7-string, but most of the bands are 6-string.
And you got the baritone to cover that.
Yeah, and the baritone. Then I use either this one, which is just a little longer scale. We got the Dan Electro baritone out there.
Great.
Which is good. It sounds amazing, and this is used a lot on 3 Days Grace for all the stuff. And
that's connecting like the bass guitar with the rhythms.
It is, yeah.
Nicely.
It's just sitting, and always a single note on that.
Right. Oh, always single notes.
It's always single notes.
Do you have a preferred bass?
You know what? I prefer a jazz bass. That's my favorite to record. Fender jazz bass. It just always sounds good. I don't have a great bass of my own, so it's usually I record what the band has.
Right.
I use the band's bass.
And the bass Ampeg?
Yeah, and I have a 810 here, which is mic'd up.
Again, the KSM?
Yeah.
And a 421?
Yeah. So they just, again, for me, it's just all blending, and it all blends together without using too much. Keep everything in the same family.
How many inputs on the bass? Like a DI and an amp?
No, I use the amp, a DI, a distortion track, and a sub track. So I'll show you the sub.
Oh yeah, let's see.
So the sub I have running through here, and I mic the port down there with, I forget.
Looks like a Beta 52.
Yeah, Beta 52. That's exactly what it is. Thank you. So I mic that. The way we have the studio wired, the guitar player always sits basically right here. He plugs into here. So this cable runs into my splitter. So out of the splitter for bass, I'll go into my Ampeg SVT bass amp. I'll take another one and run it into Ampeg SVT Pro. And basically what I do here, so this is the sub. So I'm cutting everything except and cranking all the lows. So all I'm getting is a sub. I'm getting nothing but sub. It's just the lowest frequency.
Fantastic.
And the way it's patched there, you take the bi-amp out of the head. And the guy in Fear Factory showed me this, so I've been using it ever since.
Oh, great.
So it's his trick, actually. And after that, I got to get that head, because nothing sounds like it. And I remember even first time Chris Lord-Alge mixed something for us, he goes, how do you get that that sub sound on your bass. And I go, well, this is what it is. And it has to be this combination. It just works with that cabinet and with this head. It has to be this SVT4 Pro through that. That's an SVT Pro. And then I run another one through the Sans amp here.
Yep.
And then a DI just automatically always comes into Pro Tools 24 into my thing. So there will be 4 tracks: the amp, DI, the distortion, and the subtrack.
Nice. And what was the amp again?
The amp is the SVT right here, which is an early 70s SVT.
Early 70s one here.
And it's been modded by Mark. Do you know Mark Van Gool?
The name rings a bell, but I don't
Yeah, he's just like, he would text for everybody. He's an amazing tech. So it's like, whatever he did, he tightened it up so it's super tight and clean. It has that real tight piano tone. And
beautiful.
yeah, and then every now and then, I like this pedal on it. I'll use on the bass, which I like a lot, B7K, this pedal, which sounds great for a little distortion. It's great for bass, but it gives it like the bass tone.
Finland.
It's amazing. Yeah, I highly recommend. Their pedals are really good. And the distortion in the Sans amp, will play around with the Sans amp. That's most of the case. Every now and then we will run it into like a Wizard amp instead, and then I'll put a pedal on it for distortion as well. Like if that sounds, because some bands think that Sans amp is too processed or too fuzzy sounding for the bass distortion. Right. So they go, I'm not into that. So we'll run it through an amp, like really quiet, the bass.
And there's a sort of emotional response as well, like it's a real amp.
It's a real amp, and they like that. So so we'll do that, and then I'll use like something like the Big Muff or Fuzz War or whatever on
Death by Audio Fuzz War.
That pedal sounds great. And
I like the setting.
Yeah,
everything at 11.
Everything at 11. Just turn it up. Turn it up and see what happens. Well, here we got some of our amps, some of the collection. And then there's a few down there as well that have a Silvertone and another Wizard and a Vox transistor amp sitting right there too, which sounds great on cleans. So where do you want to start on the guitars?
Well, I think off camera we were talking about how different amps, you were saying different amps perform better with low string stuff. And so I think you were saying you're sort of focusing more these days on the Wizards and the 5150.
Yes. So basically, like for the last few years, we've been doing a lot of more metal or active rock, modern rock bands that are all into low tuning, either B or C, the B's, A's, or C sharp. So I find for that, the 5150, this is like the original 5150, and I had Matty Bruck, who's Eddie Van Halen's guitar tech, because I got to know Matty really well doing the Van Halen record, and he did the mod in this 5150, so it's the same one that Eddie had in the 90s.
Amazing.
So this amp sounds great, and I use it on so many records. It just, no matter anybody that plugs it in, they go, like I'll go, let's audition amps, and the minute we go to 5150, that's it, that's the amp. It just sounds good. It just works all the time, and it works in low tunings. It's tight.
I know a lot of people, that's their favorite amp.
Yeah, it just sounds good, and it I don't know, it works for the kind of music we do. It's always reliable. If I want a little bit of extra grit on it or whatever, or distortion, I'll put the Tube Screamer on it. For the more metal projects, I'll like the Tube Screamer on it. Then I also like the Wizard 50. This sounds really good. It just has a mid-range that no other amp has. It cuts through, and it's tight, sounds good, holds all the low tunings. So that's another one of my favorite amps. Both Wizards actually, that one or that one. Even the MC2 down there sounds great. So those are more for the modern things. That amp down there is a 1970 Marshall Major 200 watt.
Wow, those are huge. I remember those.
Yeah.
So loud, yeah.
It's so loud, and I had Friedman.
Yeah.
He did the mod in it, so.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so it's the same mod, apparently what he did for Eddie Van Halen, but that amp sounds amazing too. So that amp's used a lot. So basically 80 to 90% of our records would be, I'd say 5150 with the Wizards, and also the Bogner. I can't forget the Uberschall. So they're kind of all used, and everybody always has the same reaction to all of them. You plug them in, and no matter what, the minute you put up the fader, they go, that's the sound. And because everything's set up, nothing really changes here. EQs don't really change. We have them all set. So those are our favorite. The orange will be used as well. which, you know.
You doing those for lead tones or?
Lead, even rhythms. Leads, to honestly, my favorites, like I told you, to do the leads is a silver tone through the super reverb speakers. So I use the super reverb speakers. So I disconnect the amp from it and then just use the speakers for it. And because I don't have to EQ it, it has its own frequency. Like it's like, what do you call it? I don't know. It just sits in there. I don't have to EQ.
Cuts through.
It just cuts right through. You could just bring up the fader a little bit, no matter your wall of guitars, and you go, well, there's the lead tone.
Yeah.
So I really like the combos for leads. If I'm doing octaves and stuff at blend, I love the Sound Cities, the 50 watt, or I have a 100 watt too. Mark's actually fixing it, but and 120. And the Sound Cities just sound cool to me. They have a tone like no other tone. They're interesting, and no matter what record I do, when people go, they'll go, oh, I love the sound of that record you did, and I love this song. What guitars are you using? And then I'll look up or I'll throw up the session. I go, man, Sound Cities on that one. Yeah. It's always the Sound Cities on that one. And the Daughtry record we did, the first Daughtry record, is a lot of the Sound Cities, and it has a kind of fuzzy tone to it almost. It's not a real clear tone. It has this fuzziness about it, but super warm, but it's clear yet. So
it's just amazing. We were talking about off camera earlier, how those kind of amps when we were kids were worth nothing.
Yeah.
Everybody, oh, you haven't got a Marshall, and then used, they were like £50 when I was a kid.
Yeah, I know.
And now they're what we want because they're all different.
They're all different. They sound different. It's even like we talked about the plugins, like a lot of the plugins just sound the same. And you know, like, you know, I love plugins and stuff, and they do their thing, but they don't have that separation that you still get from the real things. The real things give you that separation. And to me, that separation...
Well, so many more variables.
There's so many more variables. Yeah, there's so many more variables. And even from the amps, it's just... You don't have to try almost. It's like running through a Neve console. It's just going to sound good. The harmonics are good. They're so musical right off the bat. You just bring it up and you go, oh, I don't have to do anything. It's just there.
Let's go look at the Neve console. So where should we start on this? I mean, 8058, absolutely gorgeous.
Like Howard said, when we moved from Bass 7, that's what we recorded all our records on, 8058. So we knew when we were moving, if we wanted to keep the same sounds from our other records and why people came to us, it was important to have an 8058. Either we were going to buy racks of them or find a console. It just happened on Vintage King. This showed up. I saw it. I called Howard. Howard said, let's get it, you know. So, and like he said, you know, you saw in his interview, I had Pat Schneider come and he redid everything, you know, took it all apart, cleaned it all, put all new switches in it, you know, made it race ready. So
race ready.
Yeah, race ready. So
Pat is a wonder, by the way. Not only is he really good with Neve consoles, he's also a sweetheart.
Yeah, amazing.
Very easy to work with.
Yeah, amazing. Got the console in tip-top shape, and it sounds amazing. You know, you can't go wrong with it. It's hard to make a mistake with it. You bring anything through it, and it's just going to sound good. And I know a lot of people are, you know, have their own things, and not everybody has a Neve console. Since I've been tracking, I've used Neve. It's either like Neve through an SSL or it's always been Neve. So for me, that's what I've been used to. You know, new people come up and use different stuff in today's era. But I still have part of that old school that I brought with me. So I just stay with it. That's what works for me. And, you know, I know how it works. So I just keep using it. And yeah, for me, it's musical. I love how the harmonics sound on it. I like when how it distorts if you want to distort the console or run it clean. It works either way, and to me, that's important. And what I like about it too is it's hard to make a mistake. It doesn't matter what, even if you're not sure in your tracking, and you know sometimes you get lost or you go down that rabbit hole in the middle of a record. I trust the console that. When I put that song up a week later, or what I recorded, oh yeah, it actually sounds really good. I was panicking that day. You know, it's not as bad as I thought it was because the Neve saved me that day for when I wasn't on. And that's what I like about it. So when I'm on, it performs. But if I'm not on that day, I know that whatever I run through there is going to be pretty good anyways. And nobody's going to come after me and go, why do you record these? Or, you know, say if Chris Lord-Alge's mixing the record we did, he's not calling me, Mike, you got that console in there. What kind of sounds did you give me? It's going to be good, regardless. It captures the right harmonics, and especially since I don't destroy the sound by EQing or compressing. I try to keep everything as natural as possible. It's going to be good.
Fantastic.
It's just the sound is going to be there. So for me, that's important. It's like trying not to get myself into trouble down the line, because a lot of times I don't know if I'm going to mix the record. I don't know. And maybe it goes to Chris Lord-Alge, maybe it goes to Serb. And so I got to be prepared that if it's going to some top guy, I don't want a phone call going, I can't mix this record because the sounds suck on it. Mm-hmm. No wonder you can't mix it, So I want to make sure they get the best sounds. And I know with this, that I'm in pretty good shape, even on my worst days. To me, that's important, that I could go home and sleep and go, oh, okay, yeah, it's going to spike to mix, and I know it's going to be good.
You've got an array of monitors here.
I do.
What are the great thing is, obviously, you can be at seating, and are you running Pro Tools all yourself?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you're the everything Pro Tools engineer and the engineer, which I relate to. I think that makes perfect sense. So do you find yourself NS10s a lot, Amphiums, KRKs, Adams?
So for me, it's NS10s 90% of the time.
Okay.
And I'm on them. I know what they sound like all the time. I don't run a sub on them, even though there is a sub under there. But I don't use a sub on them. So that's my main thing. If it sounds good in the NS10s, and again, because I grew up on NS10s that's all I've listened to for 30 years, so I'm used to them. I've tried other monitors. I like the Amphions, but they're more of a finishing for me. Like at the very end, when I'm happy with the mix, I'll put them on the Amphions and they'll show me a few little things. It's hard for me to start to mix on them. I can't. Tracking is all NS10s or Adams or KRKs, but mainly NS10s.
Is that a lot for maybe when you have members of the band sitting around?
So when the members of the band are here and they want it loud, it's the SA3As, the Adams, and I got a big sub there, so I could crank it and they feel it, and so it's all for them. And again, if I'm mixing here and I want to hear what the bottom end is and I want to crank it up because we don't have large monitors, I have a pretty good idea of what the low end's going to sound like. Again, hard for me to mix 100% on the Adams. There again, for the very end or checking just the low end. NS10's
probably fun for bass players as well.
Bass players, fun for bass players. They'll like the low end. Some guitar players like to track through it. They want to track really loud. I prefer still the NS10s for tracking everything. Like I'd rather have the bass player and guitar player through NS10s. I always just say when I only worked on NS10s, it was like if the snare drum and the guitar sounded really offensive, that's when they were good. Yeah, that's exactly me too. Like I go, like if it's bright and it's hurting my ears and it's like, I take it out and it's perfect. Yeah. And if I could hear, and people go, well, how do you hear your low end on it? I go, well, I don't. I covered them up now, but I used to just watch the woofer. I go, well, if the woofer is moving in a certain way, I know my low end's okay. Yeah. And for me as well, if I could hear the kick and bass in the NS10s, and it's clear in the NS10s, the bottom end is pretty good anywhere I go. And because we're not doing hip hop or R&B where you need a real lot of low sub, I just find I'm pretty close with the NS10s. You've been doing this long enough that you know. I know where it is, so I'm not really searching for it. Now, if I mix on the Adams and I'm listening to the low end, I go, man, the low end's amazing in here. I spend too much time on there. I go to the NS10 and I'm wrong, or I go to my car or at home, I'm off. But if I don't even touch anything else and I just stay in the NS10s, and then every now and then I'll check it on the Oratones. If I'm right in those speakers, I'm always within, just bump up, the lead guitar needs to come up, or maybe that harmony is a little too loud here. That's it. It's really levels. Once it sounds good in there, and again, like you said, it's because I've been doing it so long, and it's every day. I've worked every day almost for my whole life, for 30 years doing this, and I know what they sound like. I know what my tools do, and I don't really have to think about it, and that's what I want to do, not have to think about, am I wrong here? And if I do get excited, because it is fun listening with the low end. Sure. But you take it out and you go, ooh, that's not good. Yep. I'll run into problems. You fall in love with that. Oh yeah, that massive low end. Yeah. Yeah. So it's either it's massive in here, and then it's either just way too massive in the car, or it's just or it's not there. It's in between. It's like, whoa, that's too much. It's blowing my speakers out, or I thought I had way more low end than I do. And it's in between. It's very rare that I hit it 100% or on the mark. But if I get it right in there, I go, okay, that sounds good in the S10s. Let me crank it in there. Yeah, it sounds good in there. I don't have to touch it. It's there. For a lot of things, I love these Dolbys. I think they're very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I saw it because I worked with Mutt Lange a long time ago in the 90s with Bryan Adams, and he was using these on vocals, on his background vocals. But there's a
recording or mixing?
Yeah, mixing. And when we were mixing, but we could record through them as well.
Oh, wow.
But they have to have a mod in them. So basically they're Dolliers, and a guy at, when A&M Studios was still there, I forget what the tech's name was there. So he did those mods. So there's a mod in these. I'm not sure what it does, but when you run audio through there, it gives it that, even a snare or background vocals, or sometimes I'll run like clean guitar through there. It gives it this presence that just feels like whatever is coming out of the speakers, the minute you put that on, it's just like right here, you get that. It has a crunch sound, so I love those, and I'll use those for anything that I really want to pop out of the track. You don't have to do anything. You just patch it in. It's just set how it is, and that's it. They're always on. They're never shut off. And you just run audio through there. So whatever that Dolby system's doing with that mod in there does something to the sound that I have no idea what it does.
It's magic.
It's magic. It is. And, that's one thing about, pieces of gear that you just can't get from a plug-in. I
remember reading that David Kahn uses them a lot on vocals.
Yeah. They sound amazing on
vocal. The Regina Spektor sound.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's what it does. It just does it. And even put it on a snare drum or like a parallel snare drum through there, and you add that snare drum in. Nice. It's unbelievable. It's finding things that you don't have to do anything. And that's the secret. It's like, I don't want to sit here and try to get a snare sound for 3 hours. I just go, I want to hear it. Why can't I hear it? Well, run it through there. Oh, yeah, I could hear it. Good. Move on, It's like, I don't want to think about it. Same thing with this Fairchild is really cool. Again, another piece. It's like a de-esser, Fairchild.
600. I've never even seen one.
If you see colors in sound, it's that color. So the minute you put in that on something, it gives it that color, what it is. And it puts it in a... that you could just never get with EQ. It puts it in the spectrum where I don't even know how it puts it in that spectrum. You go, well, how did they get that sound to sit right there? Because I can't EQ it there. I can't compress it to come there, but you put it on, and all of a sudden the sound goes from where I can't really hear it to go, it just sits in this space that you don't even know how to get something into that space or into your frame or your picture, however you want to do it. So that's good. I love the Altec on compression, the 436C. It sounds great on clean guitars. If you really want that compressed guitar sound, it has a grid and a distortion.
And you have the mod with the tack and release?
Exactly, yeah.
Release and the threshold, sorry.
So as far as that, I like that.
Yep.
I use the BA6A a lot. That's good for like acoustic guitars and stuff. I'll use it on kick drum every now and then too. I like it on kick if you really want a fat kick, but it's a parallel as well to blend it in. That Gates sounds really cool, preamp as well, which is tubes. And basically you plug 3 mics into there and blend it, and it sounds just like nothing else.
What are you using this on?
I'll use it actually on rhythm guitars. It was used on the POD rhythm guitars.
Oh, incredible.
So it's one of those things, you put it in and you have all these frequencies in there, and you put that on, and there's no high end, there's no harshness. It's super warm, and it puts it in your painting or your frequency spectrum that you go, well, I don't even know what it's doing, that it moves them from there to here where nothing sits. And there's certain frequencies that are just hard to get into, You just don't know how are you getting that guitar into that place, or how are you getting that snare without if I add this EQ, well, that's too loud here, it takes away from that. It just does something where, like, if I look at a picture, it's like, how did you get that right in there in that picture?
Yeah.
And it just does it with just running it through it. So again, finding the simplest way.
All part of the palette.
All part of the palette.
Yeah.
And again,
Are you an art lover?
I love art. Yeah.
Who's your favorite painter? Or painters?
Oh, man. I love Monet because I just like the way, and I'm a huge Da Vinci because I just think he's a genius. So
Me too. I was just in Rome a few months ago.
I love like anything Da Vinci's done. Monet because I just like the colors he uses, and the colors are just so vibrant, and how he does water and all that. So those are probably my favorite. I know they're easy they're off.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why greatness is greatness.
Yeah.
I love Caravaggio and Da Vinci
Yeah.
and all of the same things. I grew
Yeah.
up, my father was a painter,
Oh,
a sculptor.
he was, yeah.
So I was blessed.
So for me, a lot of it is too, and even like on my Instagram, if you look at who I follow, like I follow all the painters, like paint. So there's a lot of paintings. So actually, I take a lot of inspiration from paintings when I'm creating music. So a lot of it is like, because I see colors. So for me, it's like, well, I want to look, how do I get that color, or how do I make that water look like that? And I'll even look at it. I'll pull out my Instagram, and I got everything saved in my phone for different artists, and I go, I'll show you, and I'll look at the painting, and I'll even put my phone here with the picture. So while I'm mixing, I'm looking at the painting. So it gives me ideas. So I do that all the time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so like for me, it's like everything's like a painting and a palette. And now that we're in a computer screen, so I just kind of use that. Well, there's my frame. That's my small frame. So let me see how I could fit that in there. Is it going to be a tree, or is it going to be, what is it, an elephant today? Or am I doing ocean, What is it? Is it a boat?
Yeah.
And then usually if I could kind of get it, even though I see it one way, somebody sees it totally, they're not going to see it like I do, but they see something.
Sure.
As long as I see something, they see something. It might be completely different. I go, oh, that's cool. At least you see something.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you talk about modern art, we all have different interpretations of what they're...
Yeah, of what it is.
Of what it is.
Yeah.
But you're right. If something works as a whole, whether it be a song, a part, the whole feeling, as long as it works as a whole, everybody draws their own interpretations. And I think most of the music we love is a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because then you can emotionally connect to it and go, this song reminds me of this moment in my life.
Yes.
And it speaks to me. And then Eric over there feels exactly the same way, that it means something to him, but it's a whole different experience.
It's a whole different experience. Yeah. So we all experience it differently. But as long as you experience it in a way, and you experience it in an honest way, somebody else is going to experience it.
Exactly.
It might not be on your way, but they're going to experience it like, whoa, I could experience it too.
Yeah.
It's when you're a little off, and there's a lot of times that I'll be working, I go like, I can't really get to where I want to get. And usually when I'm in that place, everybody else feels the same way too. Oh, the mix is not quite right. The sounds are, what is it? And then you have to go back to the drawing board. You kind of know, like, you want to go like, I think I could get away with it. But you know that if it's not working for you, it's not going to work for anybody else. But when it works for you, it usually works for other people as well.
But there's the balance. I always find when you're the engineer and you're mixing it, that's definitely like where the integrity really is. Because you're creating and, getting that whole palette in one go. Mm-hmm. But then sometimes, there's the commerce side where like it just wants to be, I think of like the classic Andy Wallace mixes of the 90s where a lot of what I heard him do was mute.
Right.
It suddenly became like bass and drums in verse. It's massive guitars and choruses. And there's that sort of like to get like this huge emotional response from a difference between a verse and a chorus, obviously. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's always that art and commerce balance.
There is, and I'm aware of that. So like, because you could get, I don't want to ever let my ego get in the way that, sure, this is this crazy painting. Because I know if I start getting there and I'm seeing like I'm in this rabbit hole and I go, oh my God, I just created, I know that it's going to fail.
Right.
So I got to be careful of that too, because I go, oh, that's too much. Or even if I think, I go, that if I think that's that much and I'm liking it that much, the other people out there can go, what is he trying to do?
I agree. It's funny, you've articulated it better than I can. I can guarantee the mixes I've loved the most have the most corrections from the band.
Yes. So I have to be very careful. And like I said earlier before, my whole thing now is like, yeah, it's pretty good. If it's pretty good, I'm in good shape. If I go, this is amazing, I just painted the Mona Lisa with, whatever in there, that's going to fail there because there's so much ego and whatever else in there. It's just too much. If, like, for me, yeah, I see it or whatever, but nobody else is. They're going to go, this is crazy.
Yeah, I remember when Michael Brower mixed like 3 or 4 albums for me in a row. I flew out to New York and sat with him. And he said, I've just got to get the song sounding really good and let the band or the artist take it over the finish line.
Yes.
Rather than sitting there with doing all these crazy little detail things that they're going to be like, why did you do that?
Yeah, why did you do that? And I've learned my lesson a long time ago. And again, yeah, if it's pretty good, and like even the way Howard and I work now too, we don't do any automation until the band comes in. So, because if I start automating, I've already gone too far. I should be able to go, what I recorded, here's the balances of it, here's where the kick should sit. I shouldn't have to be riding everything. So there's no automation. So now if Howard and I are okay with the mix, then we go, okay, there's no automation, but you know what? The chorus vocals could come up a dB. That's it. So we're very careful. Up 1 dB on the chorus vocals. Now let's just see where that sits. So it's very delicate on how we move forward. So then when the band comes in, because yeah, if there's too many moves, the band's going to be going, they're not going to understand what's going on. They're going to go, why is there so much going on? They don't know what's going on. For you, you're down that rabbit hole, and I could see this move, and I EQ'd the reverb here, and there's all these little pokes and down here, but it gets to be a mess. And you think it's good, and while you're sitting here, you take it out, and the band comes in, and it's like, it's a fail. Just take the faders down, start again. But if you leave it kind of in the rough mix position, they go, yeah, that's really good. And that's a trick too we use, is like, never say it's a master mix. Here's a rough mix. Here's a monitor mix. Live on it. They'll live on it. Turn the lead guitar up a little bit here. The octave guitars come down 1 dB. That's a good mix. There you go. There's your mix. So
marvelous.
Trying to keep it simple. The more simple you could keep it, the better it works. Easier it works.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks ever so much. This has been fantastic.
Okay, I hope you get some good stuff.
Oh, no, there's tons. Yeah. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. This has been really fantastic.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to do this. It's fun doing this. So.
Well, we'll have to think of other things to do.
Yeah.
Marvelous.
Awesome.
Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and we'll see you all again very soon.